You're a third-rate duelist with a fourth-rate deck.
Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. The month of February is upon us, so it's once again time for me to give out my monthly tier list for Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links. As always, this tier list is my objective opinion and only applies to the ranked duels of the game and not the outside tournaments or community events. Since the KC Cup is going on, I will also talk about how I think each deck will perform there and how often it will appear. With that clear, let's get into this month's list. Tier 3. Ritual Beasts. Another man with this deck in the meta. Something you won't see change soon, in my opinion. Even with the release of the new mini-box, Ritual Beasts don't really lose anything or gain crazy competition. I believe they will be a good option for the first and actually even the second stage of the KC Cup if their top tier bad matchups are not everywhere. Next, I have Cristrons. This deck is really interesting in my opinion because they actually have a good matchup against Siranui, but they are pretty weak against Dark Magician and even Element Saber Invoked. So as you can understand, they won't really do great in the KC Cup, which I predict will be full of Dark Magician decks, but if you face a lot of third card Siranui, maybe give Cristrons a try if you have the deck available. Next, I have Cyber Dragons. A relatively new deck stays put in the tier list. A powerful fusion deck with the ability to OTK if given the chance. I don't see it being really popular in the cup just because it's pretty expensive to make in regards to how good it really is. Probably the deck that needs to prove itself the most this month to keep this tier placement. Next, Thunder Dragons. The last deck of this tier, meaning of course tier 3 is exactly the same as last month. I believe Thunder Dragons has pretty much the same story as all the decks so far. They are pretty good, can find success on the ladder and totally on the first stage of the KC Cup, but also struggle against some of the top tier decks. Thunder Dragons still have problems with their turn 1 play sometimes and even with the consistency. Moving on to tier 2, the first deck here is Element Saber Invoked. This deck is still a strong force in the meta. Maybe another limitation is coming from Konami after the KC Cup, but I think that paired up with Fiendish Chain, this deck is even scarier than before. Of course, Fiendish Chain is not an extremely common card since it was featured in the newest main selection box, meaning that most people on ranked don't even have it at one copy. The deck although has counterplays for every single deck in the meta, and the Invoked engine is still one of the best engines in the whole Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links game. Now I have to say, if your deck list contains 3 Fiendish Chain, 3 Cosmic Cyclone and at least 2 Purgatrio, your deck might actually be tier 1. But with most people not having multiple copies of Chain, I can't yet put it up there. Next up, I have Black Wings, another strong deck. It unfortunately struggles against Dark Magician, but it is still a force to be reckoned with. Paired up with Sealed Tombs, it can be a problem even for Siranui players. I think we'll see both Sabers Invoked and Black Wings in the KC Cup, especially in the second stage when it becomes live, although I'm not sure how popular these decks will be in the first stage. Moving on to tier 1, Dark Lords. Well, this is probably the first time I consider Dark Lords being tier 2 and not tier 1. The deck still stays tier 1 for me though, but it's in a tough situation because more competition arises as time goes on. While they are more vulnerable, they can still dominate on the ladder with banishment of the Dark Lords. I think they might see less play than expected in the KC Cup, especially if we have Element Saber Invoked decks gain popularity. And I would say that if Fiendish Chain wasn't from a selection box, and cards that are specifically only from there are pretty tough to place in tier sometimes, but I would say if we had Fiendish Chain available in the game in general, in a regular box, then I would swap tiers Dark Lords and Element Saber Invoked, but for now, Dark Lords stay tier 1 for another month. Next, Siranui. This deck is clearly a tier 1 force this month as well. Not only has a 30 card variant surfaced that has tilted a lot of people, but the 20 card version is mostly free to play and will also see a lot of use in the KC Cup. The deck is starting to get hate, so you can understand just from that it's a good and also popular deck. I like Siranui and I have to say they will annoy you sometimes and you'll see people moan about them, but also know that they are manageable to beat, especially with the right decks in your deck, and also using sealed tombs that can strongly put them in a bad position to begin with. Next, Dark Magician. The only deck that actually changed spot from my last month's list. Dark Magician has gained crazy popularity and has an amazing tool in Dark Magician Circle. The deck is really powerful, will see a ton of play in this KC Cup, but even this deck has a strong vulnerability against Cosmic Cyclone. I think the current meta is pretty good. Every deck has a chance and can take against the top tier decks. With that said though, Dark Magician opening with an optimal hand is probably the best opening hand a deck can have at the moment. That's my tier list for the month, and I think the most used decks in this cup will be Shiranui and first will be Dark Magician. Leave your opinions in the comments down below, and of course subscribe for more content on Yu-Gi-Oh! Duel Links. Thank you so much for watching, best of luck in the KC Cup, I'll see you in the next one.